Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Iconicast Podcast. This is episode 4. I'm Professor Geek, your host, and we are moving right along. 4 episodes in, which is good. This matches up with my intended schedule of releasing once a month, thereabouts. I did get a little bit behind, about a week or so, which I'll try to make up this summer. For those of you who don't know, I actually am a real-life professor, a writing and literature professor. And this time of the year, end of the spring semester, lots of final papers, lots of exams and all of that. So we're coming out of that, though, and hope to be able to bring you some really good content this summer. So thanks for coming back. Thanks for hanging in there with these long podcast episodes. Hopefully you're enjoying them. I do seem to be getting good feedback on the from the email, which is, oh my gosh, I'm always blanking, iconicastpodcast@gmail.com. I'll have it in the show notes. It's down below. So that's where you can send your questions, your comments. I am logging all those questions that have been sent to me. I'm planning on possibly doing a nice big question and answer episode, maybe as a bonus episode one of these months this summer. So we'll see about that. But it's always good to hear from you, so I appreciate that. Today we have a good episode coming up here. Going to talk about, we have our usual 3 segments. First, I'm going to talk about the what's specifically American about the aspirational hero, the American monomyth, how that kind of came about historically in terms of cultural tensions and all of that. And there's a whole reason for that. I'll break into the segue into it. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the American monomyth and why it's so distinct and why it's so unique and why we need to treasure it instead of constantly trying to deconstruct it and bring it down. Then we are going to do another physical media review. I showed this actually, I think maybe it was the first episode when I was just talking about physical media in general. It's a nice steelbook, the Underworld collection, all the Underworld movies, Blu-ray, because, I don't really do 4K. So I'm going to actually review that because I showed it just as an example, talking about things, and some people in the comments were saying, hey, review that. So we'll review that, and we'll talk about the films and whatnot. And then we're going to continue in our third segment with the, I guess you could say, curriculum from my heroic archetypes, the courses that I teach, and I'm just trying to give some bite size or at least podcast appropriate depth and size chapters of that course or of that content. So we started out talking about heroes in general. What is the hero's journey? We talked about the American monomyth in particular. Last episode, we divvied up the aspirational versus cathartic motivational. And this time around, we're going to talk about heroic origins, origin stories, how to write them, how to spot them, how to categorize them when we see them, and so forth. What makes them well done and what makes them, maybe they lacked a little something. So we've got all that coming up in this episode. Hope you'll stick around for it.
Hey, Sound Engraver here. Just wanted to pop in and say hi and to let you know that the music for the Iconicast podcast is composed by yours truly. If you like original electronic music, check out my website at soundengraver.com. I also have content on my YouTube channel, Sound Engraver. I mainly do music and sound experimentation. I work in Logic Pro, Super Collider, but I also talk about art because I like that kind of stuff. So if any of that interests you, stop by my channel or my website, drop a message. I'd love to say hi. And now back to the iconic Professor Geek.
Okay, so in this first segment, the idea for this segment came about because towards the end of my, I call it, it's a course I call Constructing American Heroes, but it's basically my heroic monomyth or heroic archetypes class. And at the end of the class, I talk about the Paragon. And that's a sub-archetype. It's a unique sub-archetype because it's always and can only ever be aspirational. So if you stuck with me last episode towards the end, you heard the differences between the aspirational heroes versus the cathartic motivational heroes. Those are 2 basic overall distinctions, and there are a lot of sub-archetypes that we'll talk about eventually throughout this year that go in between them. The Paragon is a specific archetype that can only ever be aspirational. A lot of the archetypes can be one or the other. You can be aspirational or cathartic motivational as a trickster or as a frontiersman, so forth. So, but the Paragon is always aspirational. And throughout the years, I've shown or had them read different works or I've shown different films or whatever to really help us break into and discuss the Paragon. This time around, though, for the first time, I had them look at Disney's Hercules. And what a great film that is, first of all. I remember loving it when it came out. It's such a well done film, but it's a really interesting film because they've taken the Greek myth of Hercules, and it's not just, oh, they Disneyfied it. No, there's some specific things going on here. What they did, they took the Greek story of Hercules and changed a lot of things and put it through the classic Superman story lens. A lot of things with that. I mean, he is the square-jawed classic Superman, who stands for truth, justice, and the American way, except it's Hercules in ancient Greece here. The woman who played Meg is doing a Lois Lane voice from the 40s. I mean, she's using that transcontinental accent. I mean, that's the diction. I mean, that's who she's supposed to be. She's supposed to be, she's Megara, but she's basically supposed to be a 1940s Lois Lane. And it's such a great film, because of a lot of those aspects. You've got the muses, who are so fun there and everything. And, of course, the gods and the titans and so forth. You've got the classic hero's journey. You've got Phil, the mentor. And one of the cool things about the film in terms of Hercules as a paragon, one of the things that are key to the subarchetype of the paragon is that a paragon has to, in the universe that they inhabit, in the fictional universe that they inhabit, the paragon has to be the symbol of what to strive for. A paragon's the ultimate symbol for everybody, all the characters in that universe. They know that that's somebody who will never let you down, who will always try to do the best they can, will always be self-giving, will always be there for you. That's the paragon. So, a Superman type character, a Captain America type character, in their universes, they are known for that. All aspirational heroes aren't necessarily paragons. The example I like to give is Naruto. If you know Naruto from anime or manga, he's a, they call him a knucklehead. He's a trickster archetype is what he is. He's always rushing in without thinking. He's making mistakes. He really, truly is a knucklehead. But he's aspirational. He's aspirational because Naruto, from the very beginning, never even conceives of maybe we should do the wrong thing, or maybe we shouldn't do the right thing. Maybe it's not good to do, maybe we shouldn't self-give, this and that. He's got his ninja way, and he will always try to do what's right. He's a bonehead about it sometimes, but he's such a fun character. He's a trickster. He blurs boundaries, and yet he's aspirational. He's not a paragon, though, because if you look in the universe of Naruto, no one's looking at Naruto as the one symbol of greatness and virtue and something to be, an example for us all to strive for in every way. He does inspire people. That aspirational hero has to inspire people, but it's not at that paragon level in terms of society in general in that universe, like it is in Hercules. Certainly is like that in Hercules and other, He-Man, Luke Skywalker to the Star Wars and the proper way the Star Wars universe is supposed to be carried out in the EU and so forth. So that's the character of Hercules, and he's a great example of this sub-archetype, and I show him for that. But it is an interesting story because it brings about an interesting point that where did the aspirational paragon really come from? And I teach American heroic archetypes because we look at the monomyth, and we've done that in this podcast so far. We looked at the monomyth, and then we look at the American monomyth in particular. And in that American monomyth, it's been exported to a certain extent throughout the world, through Hollywood and the entertainment industry and everything. But it really is a distinctly American invention in terms of this distinct American monomyth, the self-giving, the very Christ-like foundations of the hero who will 100% self-sacrifice, no questions asked, will always do the right thing because they know that they should do the right thing, right? It might be difficult. They might make a mistake and do something they thought was the right thing or whatever, but their heart's always in the right place, and they're always striving to do the right thing, and they don't hesitate to give of themselves. And a lot of people think this character just falls flat today. We talked about that last episode with the difference between just basic aspirational and cathartic motivational heroes. But I was thinking, where does this hero come from? There is, in Shelton Lawrence in Jewett's book on the American monomyth, which is a numbskull book in a lot of ways. They talk a lot of stuff they don't know what they're talking about, but they do identify the idea of the American monomyth rather well. And they do point out, and it's a good thing to point out, that there's a very Christ figure element to the American idea of the monomyth. And Christ figure meaning that it's somebody who self-sacrifices, is willing any time to lay their life down for somebody else. And we see that throughout history and fiction. There's some traces of like the American monomyth going back to, say, Sir Galahad and stuff like that. But really, outside of Christianity, we really don't see, to my knowledge, that's 100% self-giving, doing the right thing because it's always the right thing to do kind of hero. I mean, you think about Beowulf or the original Greek stories, whether Norse or Greek mythology, the heroes wanted to do heroics. Maybe to a certain extent they wanted to save a person or do the right thing, but it was really about achieving eternal life. They could achieve eternal life through their deeds. If they achieved enough feats within their life, if they were the subject of enough poems or ballads or whatever, then they could achieve a kind of eternal life. Throughout the eternity, we'd still be telling their stories. And to some degree, that's true, right? We still talk about the Battle of Troy. We still talk about Achilles and Beowulf and things like that. So in a lot of the Western world, pre-Christian or, extra-Christian world of the Western world anyway, we really don't have this idea of the American monomyth aspirational hero traced. You can only trace it back through some Christian stories. And even then, it really doesn't fully come to bear until we get to the history of the United States of America, which I'll talk about in a moment. I'm not a great specialist on a lot of Eastern myths and stories and whatnot. So, if you think of this or that Japanese or Indian, this or that story or character that you think would meet that criteria, let me know, because I'd be interested in hearing about that. But it's interesting to think about the United States, just to give a mini little history lesson, and this is very much a dime store history lesson. Real history experts and enthusiasts would easily know, oh, you could flesh that out more and say more about, but you said that, but it's really more like this. I'm just giving a very, very, encapsulated summary of the history here, though. But you had different people settling what would become the United States, at least these 13 original colonies on the East Coast, coming from different places and from different cultures and from different types of lives and life values. You did have, say, in Virginia and some of the southern colonies, the Anglicans coming over, and they were coming over for more business ventures, wanting to either find gold or ship out tobacco and whatnot, and it was more of like a business venture. You had religious freedom was a big thing for a lot of people coming over. You did have the Puritans, the Pilgrims coming over at Plymouth, and they were fleeing the persecution, as they saw it, from the Anglican Church, and they wanted to exercise and practice their Calvinism, Christian way of life, the way they wanted to, and freedom. And you even had religious freedom, in places like Maryland, a Catholic, settling Maryland, and Catholics, they weren't welcome, or they couldn't practice Catholicism, certainly not in puritanical New England or Williamsburg, Virginia, or anything like that. So there were a lot of people fleeing for certain freedoms and whatnot. But they all had some sort of strain of Christianity, right? Whether it's Anglicanism, Catholicism, or even Calvinism. And you could go deeper into this, and I think it's a fascinating topic, and I'm always kind of wanting to learn more about this. But to see how each one of those different angles on Christianity brought something unique to American culture. For example, you might not have heard the phrase anymore, but it used to be a thing that a lot of Americans were proud of. They would call it the American work ethic, meaning that Americans will get out there and they, maybe it's not the case anymore, but the idea was the American work ethic was that you could, as part of the American dream, that's why people wanted to come to this country, because here you could come and work and create a better life for yourself. It was possible. And, there are all kinds of, challenges in the way, and maybe it's not as possible now as it was then or whatever. But just historically, there was an idea of the American dream and the American work ethic. You could come here, you could make something of yourself. You could gain your own, fortune, so to speak, air quotes there. And that was part of the manifest destiny, idea, kind of played into that some more. social mobility is really what it's called in terms of history. The idea that, from the old world, you were born into a class, you were a peasant or you were aristocracy or whatever. You were just born into that class, and you didn't, it was very rare that people crossed over from classes. But in the new world, social mobility was there. You could come here with nothing, and if you were able to work your way up, think Ben Franklin, for example, just a runaway at one point, but learned the printing industry and really made something of himself, and then delved into the science and whatnot and became this great name. We have so many stories about that. That's social mobility, and a lot of that comes from the Puritans with their distinct version of Calvinism, which is interesting. It might seem like how do these two things connect? But the Puritans, there's when you say Calvinism today, there's so many different strains of Calvinism, and somebody who might call themselves a Calvinist might not necessarily believe all of this or are in the same way or to the same degree or whatever. But the basic Calvinism of the Pilgrims, the Puritans, was that we were all predestined. God had created some people basically to go to heaven and some people to go to hell. And of course you hoped, it's a silly idea, right? But of course you hoped that you were one of the elect. You hoped that you were, somebody that God had predestined to go to heaven. And the only way to know that is that if you were predestined to go to heaven, then you'd be blessed in this life. So you really wanted to work hard, and you wanted to try to make it known that you were successful, with your farm, with your whatever. Because if you were successful, if you were blessed, then people around you would know that you're one of the elect. And of course, that would help you in Puritan society as well. Oh, this person, of course they're a godly person. Look how blessed they are, and so forth, And it's just that, I know it's a really weird idea. But from that came this idea, the American work ethic was originally called the Puritan work ethic, or the Protestant work ethic, it was sometimes called, the idea of just trying to move up that social ladder, which isn't a bad thing, doing well for yourself and trying to put in the hard work and be successful isn't a bad thing. But, throughout time, there have been some sort of nefarious motives behind it. But that idea that we can do the work and then place that in context with the basic Christian story that we should all be laying our lives down for each other at any given time. Bring in the more Catholic aspect of it, to some degree Anglican. It's more Catholic, but you'd find it more in Anglicanism than you would say in Puritanism. But the idea that there's a redemptive nature of suffering, and that we can live our lives as a sacrifice to God. And within Christianity, the idea that, of course, Jesus laid down his life for everyone, and we're called to do the same, not necessarily to die, but to lay down our life for God first, but then also for those around us. And you're starting to see the connection with the American monomyth hero. It's an honor to lay your life down for somebody, and that for some people, in a martyrdom situation or whatever that might mean, going and trying to save somebody, running into a burning building, for example, a fireman. But for most of us, it basically means getting out of our comfortable bed in the morning and seeing to our children, or going to visit, our neighbor or our family member or a friend that is lonely, or, doing something, just doing your job well because that people need you in your job and they depend on you or something. Everything you do in life, you can't just get up and do whatever the heck you want to do. That's not living. That's not living. That's living 100% for yourself, selfishly. And that's not where happiness comes from. To really give of yourself in others, that you can look at this from a religious aspect, or even just an atheistic. If you're a total materialistic atheist, you can still look at how humans have evolved as social creatures. And if we're going to thrive and find happiness, whatever that is, right, you're going to have to self-give of yourself in a social setting, a family, a tribe, or something. That's just how we work. Nobody goes out and lives 100% by themselves, doing whatever they want by themselves, because that's just what they want to do. I mean, you could put another context, like a hermit or somebody who's thinking of what they're doing as though they're laying their lives down for other people spiritually in prayer or whatever. But, just to totally live for yourself and nobody else, that doesn't bring anybody fulfillment. So it's easy to see let's couple that selfless nature from Christianity, informed by the different strains and angles of Christianity, and then liken that or connect that to the idea that it's really important to work hard and to do your best at the things you do. Take pride in your work and whatnot. And you start to piece together the American monomyth. And it's interesting to look at some of the original folk tales from early America, or some of the settlers and pilgrims, immigrants, or whatever. Stories like John Bunyan, John Henry, trying to think of some others, Johnny Appleseed. You see the seeds of it there, and then it's even more interesting when you see different tellings of those folk tales throughout the centuries or the decades, and you see how they even become more and more and more molded into this American monomyth structure. I think it's something, specifically as Americans, it's something at our core of our psychology, at our culture, and I think even deeper than that, it's something at the human nature anyway. It's in the human experience. I think it's just developed in a very visceral way with the history of American culture. And I'm not being exclusive when I say that, because like I said, the idea of the American monomyth has been exported now everywhere. It's better received some places than it is others. But we're living in this time now at which it's very much sneered at, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it brings me so much, pain when I hear people say, "Oh, that's so two-dimensional. We need to be more realistic. We need to, deconstruct these heroes and make them." It is important, as we said in the last episode. It's very important to have good, solid, cathartic, motivational heroes who do screw up and who don't always make the right decisions. And then they show us that even when we screw up and don't make the right decisions, or we acted a little selfishly sometimes, that we can do better. That's important. We need those characters. But we need true aspirational paragon heroes to stand up for the standard of what is right. We need to see that standard lived out by just at least fictional heroes, so that we can have that standard in mind, and we can always be striving for that standard, even if we don't make it all the time. I mentioned that some of this is sort of a recap from last episode at the end with the aspirational versus cathartic motivational talk. But we are seeing it in today's society a lot more. We're separated, we're isolated a lot more from each other. Part of that's technology, part of that, certainly having gone through the pandemic. And I'm not, arguing for, we need to be a total commune of tribalism. Hey, like I've said before, I've never met somebody more introverted than myself. I deal with certain, levels of social anxiety and whatnot. I love my isolation. But I do know the importance of being a social creature. I know the importance of giving of ourselves to others and living for others, and why that's important. Certainly from a spiritual perspective, if you're spiritual, if you're Christian like I am, but also just from a psychological health perspective. I want to read you just as a quote. This is a quote from Pope Paul VI. So obviously a religious figure here, but we can apply it to even, I think, people who aren't from a religious background. He said, "Technological society has succeeded in multiplying the occasions of pleasure." So technological society has succeeded in multiplying the occasions of pleasure, but finds great difficulty in giving birth to happiness. For happiness has its origin elsewhere. It is a spiritual thing. Money, comfort, hygiene, material security, etc. may often be lacking, but nevertheless, despite these advantages, boredom, suffering, and sadness are frequently to be found supervening in the lives of many people. So the idea is that you can be happy and maybe not have wealth, maybe not have, a lot of the comforts and basic securities of life. On the other hand, you can have those securities, you can have that wealth, you can have everything you dreamed of and not be happy. And it's that, so that should show you logically that happiness lies somewhere else. It doesn't necessarily lie in success or in obtaining things, creature comforts and whatnot. Those are necessary for survival, and they're certainly a contributor to psychological health. But real happiness is somewhere else. And as Pope Paul says, it's a spiritual thing. Even if you don't believe in the spirit, you got to believe in the psyche, right? The development of the human mind, however you want to conceive of it. We do have certain ways of thinking and ways of being that have developed. That's why we're social creatures. You can look at the history of man and the evolution of it and everything. So happiness is elsewhere. And where is happiness? Well, the American monomyth shows us that it's in self-giving. It's in finding family, whether or not it's just your actual family or just a family in a community or something like that, of mutual self-giving. That's what the American monomyth hero shows us. So I would challenge you, if you've never seen Disney's Hercules, go watch it. It's amazing. But even if you saw it, whatever, rewatch it and think about the original Hercules story and how the original Hercules was a typical Greek hero. He was a bit hapless. He had a heroic or tragic virtue, like a lot of the heroes do. Uh, he was duped a lot of the times. He was, of course, in a constant struggle with Hera because she didn't like the fact that Zeus fathered him with a human woman. But he was a precursor in terms of the son of God mythologies. He was a son of God, a son of Zeus, come to Earth to live as one of us and to perform his heroism here, helping us, serving us and stuff like that. So there's that element of a Christ-like character within him already, and you can certainly see elements of Superman in that, coming from the sky. His father sent him to Earth, and so it's so cool to see Disney's Hercules make use of the connections between the original Hercules myth and the Superman story. It's if you're a Superman fan at all, you got to watch Disney's Hercules. It's one of those movies like The Iron Giant. It's a great Superman movie that's not a Superman movie, so I definitely recommend it. Go check it out. I could go farther with this topic. We could really delve into some even more nuances, but I've talked enough about it already. This is just a podcast, so let's leave it there. You can leave me your thoughts, though, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can certainly leave it in the comments, or you can email me about that as well. So that's all for this segment, and in a moment we'll come back for our physical media review.
Hello, Al Pals. This is Big Al of Big Al Presents on YouTube. Join me for reviews, rewatches, and rambles about the films and TV of today and yesteryear. If you want to know what I think about the current crop of films in theaters, check out my 10-word reviews, because sometimes all you really need to know about a film before you see it can be summed up in 10 words or less. And if you love watching films with your buddies, please join me for Films with Friends, as me and my friends watch a great old movie and invite you to join us. I'll make sure we do our best to provide you with a link to the film during the live stream as we're watching it, so you can tell us what you think about the movie as well. So if you're a fan of films, please join me, Big Al, on Big Al Presents on YouTube. Subscribe and become an official Al Pal.
Turning to our physical media review portion of the podcast, as I said in the intro, talking about Underworld collection here. This is the Blu-ray copy I have, which is great. I like this copy. I'm not a 4K guy. I do. It's a nice steel book. It's the cover of it's really, keep knocking the mic there. Sorry. The cover of it's really great. The sort of comic version. You've got Selene, and then the moon. You've got a lichen there. On the back, you have another. The full moon with the lichen. And I can't quite make out the artist's name there, but the artist there. One of the things that steelbooks will do sometimes, which I don't like, is there's no insert. Sometimes there is. This one didn't have one. This one did have a cardboard cover, one of the sleeves kind of things. It wasn't necessarily a sleeve you would keep, though. You had to kind of rake it apart to open the steelbook. But I did take the little stick-on paper that was behind on the cover and just kept that, because it just has the information, at least lists the movies and stuff. You don't necessarily need it. It's pretty self-explanatory in there. Man, I keep knocking that mic. It's got two holders for the DVDs and multiple DVDs on each, which is fine. Whatever. Some people don't like that, but I don't mind so much. So this contains the original Underworld. Was it 2002, 2003? Underworld Evolution. The second one, which I think was like 2006, Underworld Awakening, which was 2011 or 12, and then Underworld Blood Wars, which was 2016. The only thing this doesn't have in terms of on-screen Underworld is Underworld Endless Wars, which was a really cool little 4-part anime series they did. You can find it on YouTube. The whole thing together, I think it's like 30 minutes if you watch it all back to back, or something like that. It's really good. It's nice in the Underworld world you can imagine lends itself quite nicely to the anime genre there. And it's an interesting little story. I'll talk about the physical media of it first, and then I'll talk a little bit about the films themselves. Like I said, I do like nice steel books. I just like the presentation of it. This is Blu-ray. Now, I had these movies on DVD to begin with, and I actually still kept my Underworld DVD. My original Underworld DVD, I never let it go. I kept the little plastic sleeve it had in it because it was really great. A nice, and this is just DVD that came out in like 2003 or whatever. You can see the cityscape is just on the actual DVD, but the plastic slipcase has Celine and has all the information on it. And I love this version, just the first movie, but it's a collector's edition, and it comes with the inserts. Comes with really cool drawings of Underworld, sketches, sketches from the storyboard and everything. So, this is the kind of stuff that I think is lost in a lot of the steelbook collections. Sometimes they have something like this that's good, but a lot of times they don't. So that's great stuff to have in it. The insert booklet also gives you a clip of the comic book. There were graphic novels made for the movies and comic books which continue the story in some ways and everything. And this all came with the regular DVD, and I'm never going to give that up. It's a great thing. And again, Underworld's a movie that's made in 2003. It's one of those that I don't necessarily need to see the clearest, crystal clear version of it on film. And, I talked about that for Fright Night, the physical media review I did in the last episode. And I was saying, especially for Fright Night, a movie made in 1985, I personally think the practical effects they did look much better on DVD than they do on a Blu-ray. I really do think that. I will say, though, with Underworld, because of the filters that they used, all of the films used some elements of this filter. They ended up taking it way too far by Blood Wars. But the first two Underworld movies directed by Lynn Wiseman, there was that sort of bluish, darker kind of filter to give this world the otherworldly look. And it had that very sort of 2000s Gothic, feel, which I loved. And it was kind of cool seeing that on a more crystal clear screen, like a Blu-ray. 4K might be too much for me. I don't know. But I did get to appreciate the screen a little bit more. I didn't feel like I was looking through such a fog. I remember seeing it, the original in the movie. The original two films I saw in the movie multiple times, in the theaters multiple times, and I did buy the DVDs. Really loved those two movies. I lost track of the franchise after that. I thought I'd seen more, but it turns out I didn't. So watching Underworld Rise of the Lycans, I forgot to mention that one earlier. That's on here as well. That's part 3. And then Awakening 4 and Blood Wars 5. These were new experiences to me. I watched all of these in the last couple weeks getting ready for this review. Underworld is a great idea. It really started with Kevin Grievo. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I knew I was going to. I told myself, look it up before you start recording the podcast, but I forgot. Whatever. Kevin Grievo, if that's his name, pronunciation right. Great guy. He's a writer. He's written a lot of great comics. He's written for television. He's acted in television. He was Ray's, the big black muscular Lycan. He was in the first film. He was also in Rise of the Lycans, which was really great to see him. He was the subject of one of the comics that kind of go off and tell some more of the story. So I met him at a con. I met him at a Scares That Care con, which was in Williamsburg, Virginia, actually. And he was there, and I went to I got a picture with him. You can see there. Got him to sign his I, Frankenstein comic and everything. He was a really great guy. But he did a panel with, I'm blanking on his name now, but the actor from American Werewolf in London. They did a werewolf panel. And, they were talking about a lot of great things. But Kevin said that when you're writing an idea, you got to have a pitch, an angle to it. And for Underworld, he said, because Underworld, it started with him. It was his idea. He'd written out a story or either had the general idea for it. And he got the interest of Hollywood, and it ended up being developed between him, Lynn Wiseman, and I forget the other guy that helped develop the script and everything, but was a producer. So, it became Lynn Wiseman's baby, in terms of he was in charge. He's the writing and the helm and directing and all of that. But it really started with Kevin Grievo, and Kevin got to play a role, in the film as well. So he said, when you've got a story, you got an idea, and you're trying to get it noticed, you got to have some sort of natural spin. So he said, taking his idea to movie execs saying, hey, werewolves versus vampires, they're like, But if you say, hey, it's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet, a forbidden love between werewolves and vampires, then suddenly Hollywood's like, ooh, oh, that's interesting. And this is way before Twilight, right? So, none of the stigmas or the baggage of that kind of romance vampire werewolf thing, that didn't exist then. He also was interested, he said he had a background in genetic engineering or genetic biology. So he was interested in a take on vampires and werewolves that was more biological and not so supernatural. There's still obviously some, you can't totally divorce it from the supernatural. But I had said in my Fright Night review last episode that I really hate it when they do, say, vampire movies and they try to take away the religious foundations of it. Somebody will hold up a crucifix to a vampire in a modern movie and the vampire go, oh, ha, ha, you've watched too many movies. That doesn't work or whatever. I hate that because I think that you can't take away the religious foundations, the supernatural foundations too, of these vampire movies. The reason Underworld's an exception to that is because Underworld's not a story. It's not a vampire preying on humanity or werewolves. It's not a horror story at all. The Underworld stories are action adventure and drama. It's really about these two warring factions, the covens of the vampires and the packs of the Lycans, and their history together and their warring, it's just this epic story. It's not a horror story at all. So it didn't really apply to that, and his take on the vampires, worked great. I bring that up, though. I bring that up because he said that, you got to have that angle to pitch it with, and that was there from the beginning. The foundation of the Underworld franchise is the forbidden love. It's the forbidden love between Celine and Michael Corbin, and then even in their past, it was the forbidden love of Lucian the Lycan with Victor's daughter, the vampire. I forget her name, but they named her and fleshed her out more in Rise of the Lycans. So that's there at the foundation of the franchise, and the first two movies were glorious. The sequel picks up right after the first one ended, and then the first one ended in a way that could have been just the end to the movie, but it definitely ended. There's more to the story to be told. It was, they were hoping for a franchise, and they got it because it was so popular. And the second one delivered on that. Len Wiseman's still directing. It really pushed the story in logical ways. It made perfect sense. The appeal of those two films, a lot of people talk about, oh, they were female-led, and this and that. And they were technically. Kate Beckinsale, played the character Celine to perfection and was well-directed. She's gorgeous, and she handled the action and the, whatever stunts she did do, as opposed to her stunt person, really well. That's not the central appeal of those movies, though, or at least it wasn't the thing that made them so popular. I really think, this is, again, pre-Twilight. It was that forbidden love between the vampire Celine and this Michael Corbin, who was eventually bitten by a Lycan and at first a werewolf. But that's there. There's also this anima aspect or appeal to the movies. Now, I'm getting a little Jungian here. The anima, according to Jung, was a man's perception of a female. Again, very much a dime store tour of Jungian psychology here. You can go deeper with this. It's a fascinating topic. You should look it up. But, the male fantasy girl doesn't exist in reality, can't exist in reality, because she is a 100% conception of each individual male's, upbringing in life and so forth. But here you had this story about this guy, Michael Corbin, going about his life, doing his own thing. He has sort of a tragic past, but he's just doing his thing. He's a doctor, young guy, but still doctor, working in Europe there, Eastern Europe, Budapest, I think. And suddenly he's this world that he didn't know about, this underworld, breaks in on him. These Lycans are looking for him, and then the vampire Celine herself is looking for him. Celine develops this infatuation with him at first, and she's this centuries-old vampire who's incredibly skilled at all this fighting. She's a death dealer, going after the Lycans. Gorgeous woman, suddenly so interested in him. I mean, that's a very adolescent male fantasy, and that was key in the movie. And they developed that. I mean, they didn't just leave it there. It wasn't just a thin little thing. They developed that. And then for Michael Corbin, too, even though he's not skilled at fighting or anything, because of his lineage and bloodline, he's able to become eventually half Lycan and half vampire, which is he's the hybrid, and it's a big thing. And she tells him in the second movie, there's never been a hybrid. You're the first. Your powers could be limitless. And we see him coming back from freaking death. I mean, like his heart is gone, not just stabbed. No, it's like gone. There's like holes in him, and significant holes in him, and he still is able to come back. So he's immensely powerful because of this, and that's again part of that little power fantasy. Even though it's Celine's story, she's the main character. We're interested in her psychology and her background. There's that element of Michael there, and certainly the love story between Celine and Michael that is essential. It's central to the appeal. It's what the foundation of everything was built on. So those two movies handled that wonderfully. Then we got Rise of the Lycans, which was going back and telling a prequel, which was really well done. I mean, we were able to come back and see more of Lucian because he dies in the first one, so we actually get to see him and his origin story there. Reyes comes back, we get to see him, which is so fun, and it's a really well done origin story. It feels like Underworld and Underworld Evolution were those slick, modern, gothic, kind of techno-ish, but I don't know. Very cool stories, very much within the 2000s there, and it was cool seeing that world and that story translated back to, what was it, like the 1200s or something, when the Rise of the Lycans took place. So now it's suddenly more of a epic fantasy kind of action drama. Really well done, and the guy who directed Rise of the Lycans was somebody who had worked with them on the Underworld movies, and it worked out well. It was a good film, a really good film. Then in 2011 or 12, they did Awakening. And there are some cool ideas in Awakening. And Awakening could have worked better, I think, for some ways. It's not a horrible movie, but it just loses a lot of what made the first Underworld movie so special. And I think looking back, it didn't have to. I think it could have just been a really interesting moment if Blood Wars hadn't been as horrible as Blood Wars was. If Blood Wars had really taken it and Celine finds Michael, I won't ruin it too much for people who haven't watched it, but Michael's really not in Awakening, other than a couple scenes here and there or whatever. They're separated, and there's this time jump. I guess I am just ruining some of it, but it's basic premise stuff. You get this in the very beginning of the movie. They're captured, they're put in this sort of cryogenic freeze or whatever, because there's this weird thing they did with the Underworld Evolution, or the evolution of the Underworld series, where suddenly, somewhere between Underworld Evolution and Underworld Awakening, everybody finds out about vampires and werewolves. Yeah, humans found out about it at this point, and they're against, and they're trying to fight against and take out all the werewolves and vampires. And yeah, this is a thing. It happened. They don't give us the story of this. This is a pretty freaking big thing to happen. And for Underworld, the first two movies to take place right after each other, and we've got a pretty linear, coherent story thus far, for it to just time jump. And I don't care that it was so many years later. That's fine. Still give us that story. You can't just say, oh, yeah, all that stuff happened, so now suddenly, everybody knows about vampires. Yeah, we didn't show you that, but just pretend that happened. And now Celine and Michael, they're on the run. And, now they get captured in the first part of the movie. And then time jump, 12 years. They've been in cryogenic freeze for 12 years. So it's like 12 years later now. Slow the freak down. It's a story. This is horrible writing. This is wretched writing. Lynn Wiseman, he was still producing and still part of the writing, I guess. I don't know why this man, signed off on this, but he's done this with a lot of his properties. They tend to kind of go this way, and I think it's a statement to how storytelling was in the 2000 teens. This is really when it started to go downhill like this. Time jumps, we don't care, let's just modernize it, bring it up to date, whatever, go in a new direction, fresh direction. Who cares about the loose ends we left? Let's just abandon the foundations we built on. Let's just do something new and interesting with it. It had some good things in it. Awakening did. You had the idea of Celine as a mother, a really cool idea. And there were some great things in it, but it was very underdeveloped. Not even the anime Endless Wars really filled in the gaps. So it was underdeveloped, really didn't give us the stepping stones to this story, but it wasn't a horrible story in itself. It could have been done. We don't have Michael and Celine, but you have Celine looking for Michael. And so that love story is still central to it, even though we don't really have Michael in it. And then at the end, you see Michael escape. And Celine and her daughter go up to the building, and they're about to find Michael. You get the idea that finding him is imminent. They just missed him. Their daughter can kind of see through his eyes a little bit because she has this sort of psychic connection with her parents. Great, so we still have that foundation in the story. Then came Blood Wars and just crapped all over that and said, she don't need no man. He didn't escape. He was kidnapped from the facility and killed, so let's get rid of that guy. We don't need no man in here. Celine's a woman, sister doing it for herself. And I'm going to say this is going to be controversial, and I don't give a crap because it's the truth. It takes a lot of testosterone to do an action-adventure film well. One of the reasons why Awakening kind of started going downhill a little bit is because the two guys that directed it are so effeminate. I'm pretty sure they're homosexuals. I looked it up a little bit. I couldn't find it. Yeah, I think I found it. Yeah. How dare you say that? That's sexist. That's whatever. That's homophobic. No, it's not. It's just a fact. It's a fact. Men and women write differently. And if you get a man who's very effeminate, he's going to write more like a woman. And if you get a woman who's very, masculine, she's going to probably write a little bit more like a man. But men and women write differently. They direct differently, and it takes a high T guy, or not a high T guy. I mean, Lynn Wiseman himself wasn't Mr. Bodybuilder or anything, but he was a man. He knew what was going on, for this kind of stuff. And then Blood Wars was done by a woman in 2016. We're not that far from the #MeToo movement. We're not that far from the everything a woman does is amazing, era. And it was just a golden opportunity for somebody and some people of that mindset to take the Underworld series led by a woman and try to make it a totem for their cause and whatnot. Blood War's a mess. It's a mess. It's story-wise, directing is awful. The actors, I mean, there's some good performances in it, or passable performances, I might say, but that's about it. Kate Beckinsale at that point doesn't look believably like Celine anymore. She's still gorgeous. She's still sexy. She's gorgeous. She's Kate Beckinsale, for crying out loud. But she's playing a vampire who's supposed to be timeless. And it was amazing that they were able to pull that off in Awakening, because they pretty much did. I mean, that's 10 years after the first movie, and she still pretty much looked the same as she did, a little bit of differences. But by 2016, I don't know if it was work she had done or just getting older, as every human being does. She still looked great, but she just didn't look like the same character who was supposed to be ageless, So there's problems with that and everything. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on the Underworld history of the franchise. Now, Lynn Wiseman is early, or as late as last year, the last most recent rumblings I've heard is that he's thinking about rebooting it some way, maybe as a television series. I really hope that doesn't happen, because in the climate that we have now of Hollywood, chances are it's not going to be good. But I did love the story, and I would love for it to one day be continued, maybe in an animated version. I mean, that anime thing, a really good way to catch the aesthetic of the world. If we could go back and just pretend that Awakening didn't happen or something, I don't know. With me, when I do get into something or rediscover something I loved before, I like to really discover everything I can about the world, the franchise, world building stories. So as I said last episode for Fright Night, I have actually ordered, they're still putting it together and finishing it, but Tom Holland, the director of Fright Night, has kind of put together these stories and gotten these comic writers and whatnot and doing together a comic, a big, huge, graphic novel edition of his take on how the story should have continued after his Fright Night Origins novelization that he wrote, which gave sort of his idea and fleshed out the universe a little bit more of the original story so that he could build on it. He was maybe going to write a novel, maybe do another movie, but it ended up being comics. So that's coming to me as soon as they finish it, and I'll definitely be doing a physical media review of that when I get it. But I have ordered, got it here somewhere. Set it down. Oh yeah, I got. So there are novels that were written for Underworld by Greg Cox, and he did a novelization of the first and second films, and then there was Blood Enemy, which is actually a prequel to the first movie. So I'm looking forward to reading this. I'll probably do a review of that too if I find it worthy of it. And then I do have the collected comics of at least the first two Underworld films, Underworld and Underworld Evolution. These are the graphic novel versions. And it has the comic run in the back of it that was Ray's story, which was Tooth and Claw. And this is sort of a prequel with Ray's and Lucian. Really great story as well. So I might, I know there were some comics even right up to Blood Wars and whatnot. But if there's interest in Underworld, there's more interest in it, and if I enjoy these, I might bring these back as physical reviews as well. But our lesson is that men and women write differently, and they just do. Have the right person for the right job, and also don't abandon the foundations of a story that you built upon. Okay, if you want to do something different, do that, but go do something different. Stop trying to take something you developed as X and turn around and just pretend now it's Y. Let's do Y with it instead of X now. There's natural evolutions in story. Like I said, Underworld Awakening could have worked fine if it was a moment and then Michael and Celine found each other afterwards and we moved on, and if we had some more filling in of the story in between, but it lost that gothic appeal. So much was lost. It's kind of a bummer of a franchise to follow from beginning to end, but it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't. I know I kind of spoiled the crap out of a lot of things, but if you haven't seen the first Underworld, you need to watch it, and you need to watch part 2. And if you like them, then you definitely should watch Rise of the Lycans. But you can go ahead and stop there. So that's my thoughts on both the physical media of the Underworld Collection Blu-ray that I have there, as well as just the stories in general. You know me, I'm a literature guy, a story guy, film guy. We can talk about these things ad nauseum, but I'll stop there, and we'll move on to the next segment, finally. I'm so tired of people saying that it's just a movie, it's just a comic book, it's just a TV show. Whatever. No, it's not. Stories are the building blocks of our culture, of ourselves, even of our own psychology. We are a product of the stories we tell ourselves about our own past and the experiences on a daily basis, but also the stories that we choose to spend time with. What types of values or feelings or whatever are they promoting? What types that we like to spend our time around? They're going to shape us. They're going to shape our personality and character, and they're going to shape our perception of the world and the acts and behaviors that we put out into the world. And people don't understand that. They go, it's just a movie. It's just this. I can like and promote whatever I want. Well, of course you can, but you should pay attention to the responsibility that you have. Consume stories responsibly. As a member of society, as a human being, responsibility to yourself. Consider the consequences. You need some balance. You need some certain criteria that is going to make sure you're promoting the right kind of works, or at least have thought through the type of work that this or that story is going to do in our culture, and then make your own decision whether or not that's something you want to support. Consume stories responsibly. Consider the consequences. Consume stories responsibly. Okay, like last time, this idea or this topic of the hero archetypes, it's something I talk about a lot. I talk a lot on my YouTube channel, and as such, I also talked about this quite recently, the idea of hero origins. And it's the next logical step. It's the next place to go once we've talked about the hero's journey in the American monomyth, and then we talked about the two basic distinctions like we did last episode, the aspirational heroes and cathartic motivational. The logical next place to go is talking about hero origin stories. Now, my YouTube followers will know that I have talked about this at different times throughout the history of my channel, and just somewhat recently, in the last month or so, I re-released this video that I did on it. Now, I delivered the idea very well in that video, so I'm going to go ahead and jump over to that. It's about 10 minutes, and let that be the bulk of this segment. So if you're a YouTube follower, maybe you've seen this before, whatever. You can't see it enough, though. Let it sink in. So I'm going to jump over to that, and then we'll come back to wrap things up. Dr. Robin Rosenberg is a psychologist and writes a lot about the psychology of superheroes. And she talks about the two separate instances of a superhero's origin story, and those are the circumstances through which they receive their powers, whether they're super or humanly achieved or whatever, and then the circumstances in which they make their decision to be a hero. For the purpose of classification, I call these two separate moments the moment of empowerment and the call to adventure, which of course is lifted from Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, in which in any hero story, the hero starts out status quo until they receive that call to adventure, which they answer to step into a different world and engage in the adventure of the story. So when it comes to superheroes, either of these can come first. For example, Batman As a young child, he receives his call to adventure, so to speak, after he watches his parents murdered, and he's dealing with that trauma and decides that he wants to grow up and dedicate his life to fighting against that evil so that other people don't have to experience it as he did. That's his call to adventure. Then his empowerment comes with all of the training, with all of the studying, with everything that he dedicates his life to. Alternately, a character like Spider-Man receives his empowerment first. He's bitten by the radioactive spider, is infused with all of these powers, but he doesn't really receive his call to adventure or make the decision to be a hero until Uncle Ben's death, and the realization comes that he's partly at fault for it, and then he decides to embrace Uncle Ben's lesson of, with great power comes great responsibility. So those are two moments that are necessary for any superhero origin, their empowerment and their call to adventure. Three more categories that we can apply and mix and match over these two crucial elements are the natures of this origin. And I'll list the three categories and then go through them. And these are categories that Robin Rosenberg herself named, and they are trauma, destiny, and chance. So with both of the examples we just mentioned included trauma. Batman's loss, the traumatic death of his parents before him, and then Peter Parker's loss of Uncle Ben and the realization that he was at fault to some degree. Those are traumatic instances. And they both engaged in a positive response to that trauma. What psychologists call an activism, to go out and fight for people who might also be victims of this, and to try to prevent people from falling victims to whatever trauma that had befallen you. The thing about the trauma category, though, is that it must be the trigger. Either the trigger for the empowerment or for the call to adventure, whichever one of those categories you want to apply it to. Many superheroes have trauma within their stories at some point, but if that trauma didn't really trigger them to do anything, then it doesn't count as a qualifier to their origin. For example, Superman. As an infant, he lost his entire planet and his entire people, but as an infant, he did not understand that. So having lost that isn't a qualifier within his origin. His origin comes to our next category, which is destiny. Jor-El and Laura, however the story plays out, decided to send Kal-El to Earth. One, to save his life, of course, but then also, in the best Superman stories, Jor-El sends baby Kal to lead the people there, to help them become a better people. He chooses Earth for a specific reason, for the powers that Kal will have on that Earth, making him safe, and then also the potential that humans have. And Jor-El and Laura send Kal-El there with the knowledge that he can lead them into becoming a great people and avoid the mistakes that the Kryptonians did. So a superhero with the destiny origin can be destined at any point in their lives. They don't have to be the child of prophecy. They don't have to be destined from the moment of conception or the moment of birth. Wonder Woman is another great example. I know that some later stories try to make it as though she was born to do this or that. Certainly the movie tries to make her born to be a living weapon and some of that nonsense. But the basic origin story of Wonder Woman is that she has her powers because of who she is. She gains her empowerment there, either at birth, because she's an Amazon, or after she receives her call to adventure. But her call to adventure is winning that contest. And in that moment, she is chosen / destined to be the ambassador of Themyscira to man's world, to return Steve Trevor home, but also to represent the Amazonian ways to mankind. That is her destiny portion of her origin. And then the third category here is chance. And chance is unique because it can only be applied to empowerment. It cannot be applied to the call to adventure. Because the call to adventure has to include agency. It has to include a willing decision. It can't be by chance. Spider-Man, for example, can be bitten by the radioactive spider by pure chance. But something has to happen for him to decide on his own to use those powers to be a hero. So just to recap a little bit, we have two main parts of a superhero origin story: their empowerment and their call to adventure. And then we have three different descriptors that can be applied to both empowerment or call to adventure. The trauma, which has to be a trigger of either the empowerment or the call to adventure to count. The destiny, which can be at any point in their lives that they become destined to go do this thing. And then chance, which can only apply to the empowerment. So what good are these classifications? Well, they're helpful to people writing superheroes who want to write a good origin story and need to think, okay, what does a good superhero origin story contain? I need my empowerment, I need my call to adventure. Sometimes they can happen at once, and they can happen in either order, but they're both necessary for the origin story. And then these three classifications of different types of empowerments or call to adventure have naturally arisen because they speak to the human psychology. This is how we experience our own lives. We react to traumatic events that happen to us. We are sent. We do have a sense of destiny quite often, whether that stems from a religious background and we feel that we're called to do this or that, or whether it's something as simple as feeling as though you're destined to attend the same school your parents did or go into the same line of work or something like that. We respond to trauma and we often feel destined, are chosen, and then of course chance is easy to explain. That happens to us all the time and we need to make sense of it. So a superhero story is a great example of how to make sense of chance as well as trauma and destiny, but certainly those chance things that happen to us that leave us in a scenario in which we are uniquely suited to do this or that. We can decide to do this or that for good or for bad. The last point I'll make about these classifications is to relate back to my own two classifications of the basic hero types. And I'll place a link to the video that I made on this in the top right-hand corner as well as the description below. And I said before we get into any of the sub-archetypes of heroes, the vigilante, the frontiersman, tricksters, and whatever, that there are two basic hero types before any of that, and that is the aspirational and the cathartic motivational. The aspirational, just to recap briefly, is a hero who does not need a moment of trauma. They do not need a moral failing or a traumatic event to decide that they want to be a hero. An aspirational character is simply born with that goodness inside of them. Things can happen to cultivate it, of course, but they are pure from the start. That's the point of an aspirational hero, and they represent a high standard. Unrealistic in real life, but it's a standard that we need to be that high nonetheless, so that we can obtain the heights that we can while striving for it. If it's lower, we don't strive as hard. So Superman's a great example, the classic aspirational hero. Simply pure from the beginning, he never has a moment, or at least should never have a moment, in which he is morally questionable or given to despair or anything like that. He's raised by the Kents with his Kryptonian heritage to become the aspirational hero. Captain America is another great example. And then the cathartic motivational heroes are the ones who do have moral failings. They do slip up. They make mistakes, but they don't stay there at the bottom and wallow in those mistakes. They decide that they want to be better. They get up, dust themselves off, and keep trying. And they're trying always to be the aspirational hero, but they fail at times. They fail at times, but they keep getting up. And they're another kind of inspiration for us when we fail the standard to continue to try. So those are those two basic hero types that I pointed out in my studies. The link to all of these classifications from Robin Rosenberg is that the aspirational hero will always come from a destiny origin. And that basically goes with what I've said already, because the aspirational hero doesn't need a traumatic event to respond to. The aspirational hero could be given his empowerment by chance, but that would always come after the call to adventure, because the aspirational hero is simply born pure and they have the will to do what's right within them from the start. The cathartic motivational hero, on the other hand, they will always have either or both trauma and chance within their origin story of empowerment and call to adventure. I'll give you some examples. Captain America, pure from the start. He's never a bully. He's never a thug who has to learn to be good. In fact, he's chosen. He's destined, chosen by Dr. Erskine because he's a good man inside, and he respects power because he's never had it. So because he's a pure aspirational hero with his call to adventure from the start, wanting to do what's right, that's what helps him become destined with his empowerment. A character like Green Arrow, on the other hand, sets out as a spoiled rich playboy, and he faces the trauma of being shipwrecked on the island and all of the horrible things that happen to him on the island, depending on what telling of his origin story you're looking at. That is the trauma that he faces, and the trauma he faces on the island is his empowerment. The things that he has to do to survive, the things he must learn on the island, that is his empowerment. And at some point within that comes his call to action to be better than he was. And even once he comes back from the island and tries to be a hero, he's still the type of hero that can fail sometimes and then learn from those mistakes. So again, the cathartic motivational will have either traumatic, chance, or some mixture of both within their empowerment and calls to adventure, but the aspirational hero will be based on destiny. So one final recap of the video, because I know it's a lot of terminology. There are two basic ingredients to a superhero origin story: their empowerment, how they obtain their powers, and their call to adventure, how they decide to be a hero. And those can come in any order. Then there are three classifications which can be applied to both empowerment and call to adventure. So like I said, it's important to know what kind of archetype you're writing or that you're watching if you're just going to try to well critique or figure out why this story works so well or why this character is so resonant in culture. Look at the types of characters they are, and then look at their origin stories. Was that done well? This a timeless origin story. Spider-Man's origin story will just remain with us forever because it's so timeless. Same with Batman, Superman, because their origin stories match their archetypes. Wonder Woman even, So it's important, know the different categories, the two different parts of the origin story, the call to adventure and the empowerment, and the different qualifiers and how they should mesh in there. So good stuff for writers to know, but just good stuff for anybody who appreciates a good hero story to know as well.
Hi folks, this is Matt Wilkins from the self-titled YouTube channel, Matt Wilkins. I want to invite you to come listen to the channel. We talk about the Star Wars Expanded Universe, board games. I have 2 podcasts that go on YouTube and iTunes called Prince of the Universe, where we talk about movies, TV, anything geeky and in the past we want to talk about. And then Saturday morning Salmon Flange, we give a top 5 of some random subject every week. So why don't you come on and check it out. That's Matt Wilkins on YouTube.
That's all we got for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you come back for next episode next month. As always, working on getting this podcast on more platforms, but just staying consistent with it is a win is a win, right? I'll get points for that, especially with the semester being so busy. But I do have some things planned for it, especially coming up this summer. Maybe even coming up with some merch, stickers, some whatnot. We'll see about that. But you can keep up with me in the email address below. You can always follow my channel on YouTube as well, where I've got more regular content coming out. But I appreciate you watching. So come back next time for some more hero talk and physical media reviews, and just keep talking about good stories.